Welcome back to Live from Paris. Time for business news now, and Owen's back in the chair. And Owen, we're going to start off with News Corp again, in trouble over hacking, but this time over in Australia, Rupert Murdoch's native country.
Yeah, there's one or two Australian ministers, Lorna, are actually calling for a criminal inquiry, a criminal investigation. This dates back, this story, back to the 1990s. An Australian financial paper has got hold of around 140,000 emails from the former head of security of a firm called NDS, which News Corp owned back in the 1990s. The thrust of this is that this was an encryption specialist, this company which would encrypt the details of pay-per-view TV. You might remember those cards that used to put in the box in the early days of pay-per-view TV. The allegation is that News Corp employed a specialist unit within this company, basically to hack the codes of rival pay-per-TV companies and basically sell on that information so that then News Corp customers or NDS customers or its own pay-per-view TV customers could basically access rival channels for nothing. Lots of opponents of News Corp have said this cost these companies millions of dollars in lost earnings, but those allegations continue to rumble on in Australia, and of course it has wider implications for the whole culture of phone hacking that we know has caused News Corp so much damage.
Yes, indeed, that was in the UK, but the legality of this one perhaps slightly less straightforward than the phone hacking in the UK.
Of course, the mobile phone hacking in the UK was pretty cut and dried. It's illegal. It led, of course, to the closure of the News of the World tabloid. It's a bit more of a grey area in Australia. Certainly back at the time that this was allegedly happening in the 1990s, it wasn't completely illegal to do this kind of hacking. The law has been tightened. It has been changed, but we don't know whether it will have to be enacted retrospectively or retroactively, I should say, in the case of any kind of prosecution. I should stress as well that NDS has denied any kind of illegal wrongdoing, and that seems to have satisfied News Corp for now. And indeed, Cisco, that's the company which bought NDS from News Corp just a little earlier this month for around $5 billion.
Okay, so what should investors be thinking about all this? Should they be worried?
Well, that's a good question, given the amount of money that News Corp lost with that whole phone hacking scandal last summer. Remember, the share price pretty much collapsed in News Corp. It lost millions of dollars in terms of its market value. But since then, you can see News Corp has rebounded really strongly. First quarter profit was up 11%, and you can see the share price has come right back up over the past 6 months or so. Of course, as I said before, it has a wider implication on the whole culture of phone hacking, whether this now will translate into lost earnings for News Corp, because of course it puts the whole phone hacking issue right back at the top of the agenda. Remember, News Corp are still being dragged through the UK Parliament with that inquiry into mobile phone hacking, excuse me, and we seem to get new revelations week by week on the extent of this.
Okay, now News Corp's share price, nonetheless, seems to be bearing up quite well, but a bit of a dip in the markets more generally.
Yeah, a bit of a lull after a very strong start to the week. We were talking yesterday, of course, about the Nikkei up above 10,200 points. A good moment if you're invested in the Asian markets and indeed many world markets, maybe just to lock in some profits before the Easter holidays, and that's essentially what is happening. You can see there the Nikkei off by around 0.9%, but remember, it's had a really good first quarter, so it's no surprise perhaps to see investors just taking a step back and enjoying one or two profits.
Okay, well, one stock that is under stress right now is Total. The French energy giant's been forced to shut down a leaking gas platform in the North Sea. The environmental impact's likely to be minimal, but with worldwide demand for gas rising, it's the worst possible time to watch it disappear into thin air. Here's Catherine Viette with more.
An environmental headache for oil giant Total as gas continues to leak from its North Sea platform. The rig was evacuated on Sunday as a cloud of explosive natural gas bubbled out of the sea. The ongoing leak forced wider evacuations off the Scottish coast. Shell also shut some of its nearby rigs. Officials imposed an air and sea exclusion zone around the Elgin platform, which is responsible for about 3% of Britain's natural gas output. Due to the unusually high pressure of the undersea reservoirs, environmentalists have dubbed it the well from hell.
Well, if the reports we're getting from people coming off the installation are accurate, extremely serious. I mean, for the sea to be bubbling with gas below the installation is an extremely dangerous situation to be in, especially if it's volatile explosive gas and potentially poisonous gas.
The French firm says it's looking at the options of either drilling a relief well or sending in engineers to kill the leak, a riskier option.
I would say the relief well is a minimum of 6 months, but we're freeing up rigs that we have working for us in other areas so they can, be made available if that is the option that's progressed.
Faced with the loss of oil and gas output from the Elgin rig, as well as the prospect of a big repair bill, Total's share price plunged 6%.
And of course, we'll keep an eye on Total's share price for you this Wednesday once the European markets open up. Let's get a little bit more corporate news for you now. UPS and 12 other logistics firms are to be fined by the EU for price fixing later this Wednesday. That's according to Reuters sources. The 13 companies were investigated in 2010 for running a cartel over the cost of air freight. Both Deutsche Post and DHL were also involved, but will escape fines after alerting the EU to the scandal.
Apple supplier Foxconn is to invest 133 billion yen in Sharp after buying a 10% stake. Foxconn, which builds iPhones and iPads, has paid around 60 billion yen in a new share sale by its Japanese competitor. It's the largest ever corporate investment from Taiwan to Japan. Sharp's fortunes have dipped recently amid dwindling worldwide sales of flat-screen TVs.
And Kingfisher Airlines has suspended even more services as it tries to fight off bankruptcy. The Indian carrier has now cut half of its 56 destinations, with around half of its staff being told to stay at home. Shares in the airline hit a record low of 16 rupees on Tuesday, having lost 60% of their value over the past year. Kingfisher's credit lines have dried up as the airline lost money to competitors and high fuel prices. Now, the Olympics in London are maybe 4 months away, I think.
Not very long.
Middle of August, I think they start. Huge preparations underway, of course, Lorna. It's a big number for London. Everything is pretty much in place, and of course it's going to be a huge cash bonanza for the UK, with revenues of millions of pounds likely to be made as sports fans from over the world head to London for that 2-week festival of athletics. Of course, it's a huge logistical challenge as well for infrastructure in the UK, not least because of the transport in London. If you've ever tried to take public transport there, you'll know what I'm talking about. So away from the stadium for the Olympics, a whole industry is beginning to crop up on how to keep London and the rest of the UK running during the Olympic Games.
Commuting during the Olympics, a headache for London workers. Taking the tube to work might turn out to be a bumpy ride. Interxion engineers cannot miss a shift. The company provides data transfers 24 hours a day. The slightest electronic failure could result in millions of pounds of lost trade.
The time it's going to take to get people in and out, not only our staff but customers as well, we have to take precautions.
Mason's solution? Have the engineers sleep on site in one of the brand new pods the company's just bought. But how will it feel spending a night at the office?
Definitely a good idea. With extra people in the city, we pretty much can't get to site on time if we don't have them.
Interxion's data centre will soon also have showers and lockers, but it still doesn't beat staying at home. At the end of July, some of the 300 business psychologists working at SHL will be doing just that, whilst hundreds of riders will be rushing past their office building during the road cycling race.
We've got telephony systems in place that allow us to reroute calls to home workers so that our customers don't see a difference.
Reed has already organised dry runs and set up a business continuity plan. He says he hopes for the best, but plans for the worst.
All right, well, good luck to them. We could do with some of those pods right here in Fast, I think.
I wanted to stay in a sleeping pod in Singapore on my holiday, but my other half wouldn't have it. She thought it was a bit of a sort of a showy rip-off, really.
Oh, dear. We'll have to see what the engineers in London think. Thanks very much indeed, Owen, for that look at today's business news. That's just about it from us for now. But Stuart Norval will be here after the weather with more news headlines. Don't go away.